President John Dramani Mahama stated that although Africa is richly endowed with natural resources, its greatest inheritance remains its people and their cultural legacy. Addressing the opening of the judicial year of the African Court on Human and People's Rights in Arusha, the president said Africa's vast deposits of gold, diamonds, oil, lithium, cobalt, and other minerals have often overshadowed the true value of its human capital. He stressed that throughout history, those who benefited from the continent's resources understood the power and influence of its people, which he said explains the persecution and elimination of the several African liberation figures. President Mahama cited leaders such as Patrice Lumumba, Eduardo Mondlane, Thomas Sankara, and Amilcar Cabral, who were assassinated during struggles for independence and reform. He also referenced the exile of Nana Prempeh I and Nana Yaa Asantewaa to the Seychelles, as well as the banishment of Omukama Kambaliga of Uganda.
Africa has been blessed with many of the world's natural resources, including gold, silver, diamond, copper, cobalt, uranium, oil, lithium, and more. At times, it becomes easy to overlook that our most significant inheritance is our people and their cultural heritage. Those who have benefited from our continent for centuries have always understood this powerful truth. And that is why Patrice Lumumba, Eduardo Mondlane, Thomas Sankara, and Amilcar Cabral were assassinated. And that is why the Asantehene Nana Prempeh I and over 150 members of his clan and later Nana Yaa Asantewaa were all banished from the Gold Coast to the Seychelles. Similarly, Omukama Kambaliga of Bunyoro in Uganda was also banished to Seychelles. This is why Sam Nujoma was forced into exile from Namibia, and Nelson Mandela was imprisoned on Robben Island, which was a former leper colony off the coast of Cape Town in South Africa. And this is why Steve Biko was murdered in prison. We felt the absence of these individuals and recognized the potential that we lost as a result. What I refer to in my book as the lost decades of Africa was that period from the mid to late 70s until the early 1990s, when the brain drain occurred and the continent stagnated. The median per capita growth of developing African countries at the time was 0.0%. We felt the loss of those who left to seek better opportunities for themselves and their families.
President John Dramani Mahama has described the period from the mid-1970s to the early 1990s as the lost decades of Africa, when brain drain and stagnation slowed the continent's development. The president urged African leaders and citizens to reimagine wealth not merely as natural resources, but in terms of people, value individuals free from oppression, conflict, persecution, and violence, and assured of their rights to life, dignity, liberty, and self-determination.
That we lost as a result. What I refer to in my book as the lost decades of Africa was that period from the mid to late 70s until the early 1990s, when the brain drain occurred and the continent stagnated. The median per capita growth of developing African countries at the time was 0.0%. We felt the loss of those who left to seek better opportunities for themselves and their families. These were ordinary people from all walks of life, like architects, doctors, engineers, artists, business people, bankers, and workers in the transportation and hospitality industries. Excellencies, honorable judges, imagine if Africa measured its wealth not by our natural resources, but by our people, valued individuals, free from oppression, conflict, persecution, and violence, and assured of the right to a life of dignity, liberty, and self-determination. What would that look like? How much differently would we see ourselves? What would that wealth mean for the strength and continued sovereignty of our nations, these are not just questions for a game of what if. They are based on the reality of Africa's near future. These are questions we must ask ourselves as leaders and citizens to determine the nations we are building and the world we wish to create for our children.